Hey everybody, this is Chris with Overclockersclub. I've got something strange and unusual here from QNAP. Okay, it's not really strange or unusual, but it's really cool. This is a new Ethernet switch from QNAP, and it's not just any Ethernet switch. It's 2.5 gigabit plus 10 gigabit managed Ethernet rack mount switch. So we need to get this thing out of the box and see what it looks like. But first, let's look at some of the details. And as with most commercial or business class hardware, the box is not really all that flashy. No flaming skulls or dragons or anything like that. And it doesn't need any of that to show off the details, which we will look at right now. And looking at the information here, so you've got 8 2.5 gigabit RJ45 ports, and those are right here. They're labeled, of course, 1 through 8. The next thing here, 2 are the 10 gigabit SFP and the RJ45 combo ports, and those are ports 9 and 10 right here. And they're teamed up together, so you can use one or the other, and the same thing here, one or the other. You can't use both of these at the same time. And we'll talk about these SFP ports a little later if you're not familiar with what they are or how they work. Next thing we've got is the 2-in-1U. That is the mounting system. If you look, it's basically one of these is half the width, so it takes 2 of them, or you need to get a special kit, I believe, here from QNAP. I'll have to look into that a little later also. It is web managed, so you can do everything. It's sort of like through a browser. On your computer, improved network efficiency, designed for small offices, and then here's just some general information. Yeah, there we go. Requires a separate 2-in-1U rack mount kit. You can get that from QNAP if you want to mount it that way. Talks about the dimensions, the weight here, and I had this thing out of the box actually earlier, and it is pretty heavy. So now it's time to actually get it out of the box. Alright, so there's some sort of a mounting bracket. We'll have to take a look at that here in more detail in a little bit. And then the unit itself is packed in these nice heavy foam end caps. And let's see, there is a power cord and some brackets there for mounting it if you're going to mount it in a rack. And let's get it out of the plastic. Alright, so go ahead and get the box out of here. So it comes with a this is usually like your warranty information, if you're interested in that, in many languages. There's a quick installation guide, which is also in several different languages. So it goes over the basic functions, again in multiple languages. So if you've never used one of these or set one up, it's always good to go through the installation guide. So here's the unit. On the back, it looks like there are actually 2 fans there. There's where your power cord goes. Steel case, and these holes here on the side, these are for your mounting brackets. And across the front, there's a nice vented section actually it's across the entire front panel, and then over here is your serial number, MAC address, all that good information. You know, I should really talk about the actual model number here. This is the QSW-M2108R-2C. There are quite a few switches that are made by QNAP, and if you're interested, of course, you need to know the model number. And looking across the front in more detail, there's actually a protective plastic there. Alright, so that looks a little better. Shiny. So let's see, looks like there's a little reset button. that you can push in, usually like you use the end of a paper clip if you need to. There's a status LED. This is a management port. I'll look into that. And again, these are your 8 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports. These are your SFP ports here and there, and then your regular RJ45 ports. And again, these two are capable of handling 10 gigabit connections. Now, as with anything, that's the maximum theoretical speed that you can get. So what I'm going to try and do ultimately is look and see is how much I really can move through this. And before I power it up, I like to take a quick look inside. Now, I don't recommend you doing this at home. There's really no reason to, so I'll do it for you. But let's take a look inside and see what's going on. So here's more of an up-close view of what we have. So there are two nice rear exhaust fans, and it looks like, from the way the fan blades are oriented, that it's pulling air in through the front vents across these heat sinks here and pushing that hot air out the back of the case. And then there's a little, looks like a backup battery over here. This is your power supply, so this takes your 120 volt AC power and drops it down to a usable voltage for the circuit board there. Of course, again, you got your heat sinks, lots of chips. Looks like there's a little thermistor down in here. That's probably to monitor the temperature, and I don't know if these are variable speed fans or not, so we'll have to see if they change speed with the load or the heat buildup in the case. But that's what the inside looks like for anyone who's interested. And like I said, there is no real reason for you to really take the cover off. There's some high voltage while your regular AC voltage coming in. So now that you've seen what the inside looks like, you don't have to take the cover off yourself. Now, I will also go ahead and get this powered up and then log into the switch itself and look at the interface and look at all the cool things you can do with this switch. And like I said, my goal is to see how fast I can move data. Now I've got a TerraMaster NAS box, NAS storage, and I will see how quickly I can move data in and out of that, because it has a 10 gigabit connection on it, so it should work nicely with this switch. I also have to figure out how this bracket mounts. Okay, I figured out what the little bracket there is for, and here it says on the front, and I had to read it a couple times, but basically it's a 1-in-1U rack mount kit. That's what that is. And to do two of these units side by side here, that's what takes the special 2-in-1U rack mount kit, which you would get at QNAP. So anyway, the way this works is, since this is basically half the width of a regular rack, so there's this little angle bracket. It goes over here on the side like that, and then this piece here connects to the side like that, so that ultimately you end up with, get the camera over here, a full, basically it's almost like a blank face plate. So the entire width there is what you would put in your rack. So you have sort of an ear over here, and then this little angle bracket is over here. And you can do it on either side. You can flip this bracket over here like that. Put this over here. If you have a preference, flip that over. And then it's got the mounting screws, so I can attach these two brackets to the units. But that's what that would look like. All right, I am ready to plug it in. And usually these managed switches, they go through a boot up sequence. Sometimes it takes them several seconds to really come to life. Your unmanaged switches, usually you plug those things in and they're rolling in just a couple of seconds. But let's see, let me get this plugged in. And we should see some lights flash or something going on. Okay, yep. And maybe that's it. Since I don't have anything really plugged into it, so let me plug in a couple of cables into a few ports and see what happens. Oh, wait, I spoke too soon. So this is flashing over here. That must be part of the boot up sequence. Alright, so just after a few seconds of flashing it, it went solid. And I've plugged in one cable, and this is just regular a gigabit connection. And let me plug in a device or two here and see what happens. Alright, so this is like my uplink. This is going back to my main network, and this is bringing stuff in from another switch I have under the table with several devices plugged into it. So we see both ports have a flashing orange LED, and then here's a little legend that tells you what's happening. So on an RJ45 connection, if it's amber on the right, that means the link is operating at either 1,000, 100, or 10 megabits. So I know these are gigabit connections here, so I know they're 1,000. And then if it's flashing, that means the network is active. Alright, so it's doing what it's supposed to do. Now there's really not much of a load on the system at all. It's pretty cool in here, and the fans are running, but I mean you can't hear them. If you put your ear right down to it, yeah, you can tell the motor's running, but there's no real fan noise. But we'll see if that changes when we get multiple devices plugged in there and we move some data back and forth, build up a little heat, and we'll see if the fans make much noise. And while we're looking at the front panel here, earlier I talked about these two ports right here. These are SFP ports, and those require a little module like this. This is an SFP module, and this one is for fiber. So you plug a fiber connection in to this end, but you can also get these with a copper connection or an RJ45, so it would look just like this end. And you would just plug in a regular Ethernet cable into that. But this one is made for fiber, and there are different fiber connections, and you need to match the fiber up with the SFP port and the anticipated speeds. They make different fibers for different speed ranges, and they're usually color coded. So this one's blue, so this one is actually capable of 10 gigabit speeds, but this particular module is only a 1 gigabit unit. And sometimes these SFP modules or the ports here will sense that it is a lower speed, and it will work. I'll have to double check that with this switch, and some of them don't. So if this is a 10 gigabit SFP port, you have to use a 10 gigabit SFP module, but I don't know that for sure on this particular one. And these aren't terribly expensive. You can get these for $20, $30, $40, $50. It depends on the range or the length of the cable you're going to use to get the maximum bandwidth. You have to size all those things and match them so that you get the most out of your unit. Otherwise, you'll have a 10 gig SFP module, but you won't be transmitting at that speed because maybe you're not using the right cable or the distance is too great, things like that. So I will plug this in here in a little bit, and I'll see what kind of speeds I get. I'll connect it over to one of my other switches that has another SFP module on the other end and see what happens. And I know a few moments ago I talked about these being, up to like $50. Actually, you can buy these for a lot more depending upon the brand and the speed, $100, $150. But I've seen them for, like I said, $20, $30, $40, $50. Anyway, these only go into the port one way, so you need to make sure you get it in there the right way. This one goes in with the leads down like that, and if you put it in the port and it's offering a lot of resistance, you might have it in upside down, so don't force it, because it should just go in little resistance right at the end, and like that, just barely a click as it pushes in, and it seats in the socket there. Alright, so after you do that, you plug in your fiber. Be very careful because that's where all of the light goes into the ends of those fibers. So you want to be very careful when you insert that into the end, and it snaps, so you'll hear an audible snap when it plugs in. That wasn't very loud, but there's a little click, little snap. And now this end is plugged in. Now I'm going to see, I'll plug the other end into my other switch, and we'll see if this actually works. Like I said, sometimes your port is just one speed, and other times it will go down, but it won't go up. So I couldn't take a 10 gigabit SFP module and put it in a 1 gigabit port. It won't go up. But sometimes it goes down. So let me plug this in over here. And it's a fiber optic cable, so you don't want to kink it or bend it too far. But let's see what happens when I plug this in over here. And bear with me while I plug the module in. And that in, click, let's see. Yeah, I've got a link and an activity light, so let's see over here. Yeah, I've got an activity light over here too, so that tells me that you can use a 1 gig SFP module in this switch. And something I need to clarify, I keep calling these SFP ports. These are actually SFP plus. And the difference being SFP can handle from usually 1 to 10 gigabit connections. Your SFP plus, the bottom end is 10 gigabits, and it goes up from there to, I believe, like 32 gigabits. But again, you have to have hardware that's capable of those higher speeds. So there is a difference between SFP and SFP plus, and these two ports here and here are SFP plus. And there is the management port right there. And what that is typically for is it's convenience for your IT folks when they're in the server room and you've got a bunch of other servers and switches all in there. So it's convenient for them to be able to plug into that and do their configuration, management, monitoring, whatever they need to do. It's very convenient because you can just plug into whichever device you need to. So the average person would never have any use for this. IT people know what it's for, and they're the ones who would typically use it. Okay, so far I've got a couple of regular connections here. I've shown that my 1 gigabit SFP module works on the SFP plus port, and the fan noise, actually there is no fan noise so far at least. It's very tolerable, and at least it's pretty much plug and play. It used to be the managed switches, you know, when you fired them up you had to spend some time getting them configured, but so far this has been plug it in and you're rolling. So now I will look at getting into the interface and see what that's all about. And here is the interface for accessing all of the features and functions of the switch. The first main tab up at the top here is the overview. This gives you all your basic information. You can see that the temperature is normal, gives you the fan speed. On the left, you can see which ports are connected, and when you mouse over them, you can see the connection speed. Even though these are 2.5 gigabit ports, I only have 1 gigabit devices plugged into them. But over here on the right, you can see the two 10 gigabit ports. I've got something plugged into each one of those, and they are both operating at the 10G speeds. So looking over at the right, now we can actually look at the traffic. You can see all the actions happening there on port 10. And over here on the 2.5 gig ports, you can see everything's really happening on port 7. Now, as I scroll down to the next tab, this is port management. If we look to the far right, the setting guide, this sort of shows you the steps, and it's a brief explanation of what's going on here. And you have one of those for each one of these tabs over here on the left, and I'll show you those here in a moment. But here on the port management, you can see the port status, so I can see the status of each port, speed. Down here, here's the link aggregation, which I don't have anything set up for link aggregation at the moment. Port statistics, you can look at bytes or errors, and then the port configuration. Over here is VLAN, or your virtual local area network. And again, the setting guide, you click that and it sort of shows you some of the basics, which is nice. I like that. I should show you here. The port status, I can look at port status, which is the first selection. There's VLAN status. Link aggregation, again, like I said, I don't have anything configured there.
and then your different port speeds. And if you give this little graph over here a moment to populate, you'll see it starts to show. Looks like it updates every so many seconds. Move over to the 10 gigabit ports, and it should populate here also in a moment. There it goes. And then moving on to the link aggregation over here on the left. Again, like I said, I don't have anything configured here. Setting guide sort of walks you through how to set that up. RSTP, which is Rapid Spanning Tree Protocol. These are all your settings here. And again, the setting guide walks you through that. LLDP, which is Link Layer Discovery Protocol. And IGMP, which is Internet Group Management Protocol. Again, the setting guide sort of walks you through. ACL, Access Control List. Not a lot going on, but some good information on how that works and how to set it up. QoS is Quality of Service. And I have that open already here on the setup guide. System settings, here's where you can change your password, get the time set up properly, backup restore, and your HTTPS. Finally is the firmware. So you can check out the QNAP website for your device and make sure you have the latest firmware. I think the switch has gone through maybe 2 firmware updates, I believe, but this is your interface. Again, it's fairly intuitive, pretty easy to use. You can see right here on this main overview page, really, for the most part, everything you need to know.
Well, I spent a fair amount of time moving data back and forth through the switch, trying to see if I could find any issues or bottlenecks, and I had no problems at all. It handled everything I threw at it. Of course, I really didn't expect it not to. Pricing, right now, I see this one on Amazon for $3.99, which is a chunk of money, and QNAP calls this an entry-level switch. It has a lot of features for entry-level. I usually think of bare bones, stripped down, bottom dollar, but I guess really to enter the 10 gigabit switch club, this is right around the price point. You can look around. I don't think you'll find really too many other switches that will have more features for any less money. But again, this is probably not a switch for a casual user. This is something where you need the speeds that this switch can deliver, and it certainly does. I have the kit here, the Rackmount kit installed, and you can flip these brackets on either side just to sort of show what that looks like here. And I can feel a little bit of heat being pushed out of the 2 little fans in the back. They're quiet. I don't really hear them running. I mean, if I get my head right up there next to it, you can, but for the most part, they're quiet. Keep everything cool to the touch. So overall, I really like this switch. I would give this the Overclockers Club Editor's Choice Award. So this is Chris with Overclockers Club. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.